Hi, this is Chris, and these are a few of the memories I have of Dad. My earliest memory of him is when we were holidaying at the bank units at Sorrento and often going to the beach. But what I most remember is his singing the Bing Crosby song, Would You Like to Swing on a Star? I don't know why that memory is so clear to me. I also remember many shopping expeditions, like being at the butcher's at Southland at closing time on Saturdays to get all the bargains. And also when we went supermarketing together, he would have me add up in my head the price of each item. That's something I still do to this day. And the first time just the two of us went to see a movie. It was West Side Story at the cinema at Bentley.
When Dad started looking for a house around the Moorabbin area, his boss recommended against it, didn't think it was a good area or a good idea. So Dad had come in, got the train, got off at Moorabbin, and had been looking at houses across Nepean Highway. Didn't really see anything he liked, so he thought he'd take what he thought was a shortcut back to Hyatt Station, and just happened to walk down Worthing Road and saw the house for sale, and that's the house he and Mum ended up living in for well over 60 years. So his boss was wrong.
My first memory of Dad was in February 1962. It was my first day of primary school. Dad took me to school and picked me up, something I never forgot, and did the same thing with my kids. I even remember the conversations we had on the way home. He had a huge love of his family, both immediate and extended, but none more so than his love for his two brothers and two sisters. After his mother died when he was 13, they were there for him, looked after him and went on from there. He was never happier than when he was in their company. If you see the photos of them together, he always had a huge smile on his face, and he loved every minute of it. He missed them all very much.
When Dad was about to start his new job, moving from Commonwealth Bank to Reserve Bank, he needed to get a suit, and he couldn't really afford one, and he was talking about it with one of his regular customers who'd come in each week to chat about the horses. The guy happened to manage the local suiting store, so he told Dad to pop in after work. And when Dad went in, the guy showed him this beautiful blue suit, and Dad looked at the ticket and said, "Oh no, I can't afford that." And the guy just casually dropped the suit on the ground and went, "Oops, shop soiled." So Dad walked out and managed to get his lovely suit for £5. Sometimes on the way home from church or when we would be in the car, Dad would just randomly toot the horn and wave at someone who was going past, and Mum would go, "Who was that?" And Dad would be like, "I don't know," but at least they'll be scratching their head all day trying to figure out who I was.
When Dad bought the house in Moorabbin, he enrolled in a handyman course at Moorabbin TAFE. Having a young family, he thought he could learn how to fix a few things, like a tap or a washer or a fuse, just so he could save a few dollars. So he'd get off the train at Moorabbin Station, walk to Moorabbin TAFE, take the class, and then walk home again to Worthing Road. During one class, he was looking for his teacher to get some help. Dad was told the teacher was outside. Dad found him outside the classroom, opening up his second long neck. That was the last time Dad went to that class.
I will remember my father as a very proud man and a man who had a great love for his family. I know in the early days he and Mum made many sacrifices to be able to raise 6 children and to put them all through Catholic college education. The 6 of us never went without. I also remember the many hours of voluntary work he did over many years for his beloved St. Agnes parish in Hyatt. As I was reading through the text messages after his passing, there was one message that resonated with me, and I think it well describes the legacy my father left on people and the respect he was given. The text reads, "Painted your mum and dad's house. So sorry to hear of his passing. Both had many a yarn about their beloved Hyatt and how proud they were of their 6 children. Not a hair out of place, and a highly respected and respectful man. My condolences for your loss." I think in general, this sums up my father. God knows if there is a heaven, that's where you will be, alongside your darling wife of 66 years and our darling mother Pat. Rest in peace, both of you. You deserve it. Your loving son, Paul.
When Dad went to buy Mum's engagement ring, he took a morning or some time off work on a Saturday and drove his car into the city, and He said the jewellery store was somewhere in one of the little laneways in Melbourne. So he popped in, he bought the ring, and when he came out, he was quite embarrassed because the car wouldn't start. Fortunately, there was a sporting club upstairs from the jewellery store, and just as Dad was trying to get the car started, two blokes walked out who just happened to be the captain and vice captain of the Australian cricket team. And so they told Dad to hop in the car, try and start it up, and they pushed the car far enough along so that the engine would turn over and Dad could get going. He was extremely grateful that they'd helped him.
When I was little, I used to love going for walks around the block with Dad. He'd hold my hand. He'd always walk on the side of the footpath closest to the road to keep me safe and protected. I loved the sound of the leaves crunching under his shoes. I'd step on the leaves as well, but I could never make that same crunchy sound that Dad made. Maybe I was just too little. To this day, I still step on leaves when I go for a walk. I can now make the same sound that I remember Dad making, and I feel safe and protected.
He was a man of great integrity and a very good friend to others. Some of the friends I can think back on is the Ryans in the 70s. We used to go on a Friday night and help make some home brew and sample some of the product. His bank mates who he worked with for over 40 years, he was still catching up with a number of them, having lunch 3 or 4 times a year in the city, right up until a couple of years ago. And his current great friend from Hyatt, Les. He valued each of their friendships. They were very loyal to him and as he was to them. As a father, we couldn't have asked for more. Like many of his generation, he worked 2 jobs for many years to ensure there was enough money coming in to support a household of 8. But the greatest love of his life was his wife and her mother. He spoke to me a number of times since Mum passed 2.5 years ago how he was in awe of women in general, but Mum in particular, about what she did bringing up 6 kids in a household, and you couldn't believe it. Since she passed away, it created a huge hole in his life. He was incredibly lonely. For a while there I thought that he might hit the ton, but no, I think he'd had enough. He was very lonely. It doesn't help the fact that both him and Mum are now together. I love them both and I miss them every day. Thank you.
Until Mum passed away, we didn't have much phone contact. Whenever he would answer the phone, he'd say, "Here's your mother." Now when I called him, every second night at 7 o'clock, we'd have reasonably long conversations. While he was still living in the family home, I was able to stay with him for several days every other week. He seemed to enjoy having the company and having a couple of days where dinner was prepared for, and I'm sure those visits increased my trivia knowledge due to our watching quiz shows in the afternoon. There was one other routine he kept when I was there. He'd bring me an ice cream each evening at 8:30, something he used to do for Mum. I'm sorry I couldn't see him as often as I would have liked when he moved into his apartment, but Linda and her children took me with them to visit every couple of months or so, and he really seemed to enjoy that. I really love you, Dad, and I miss you heaps.
Firstly, we need to understand that Dad was not one to take you to the local pub and have a few beers. He was not one to come and watch you play local sports and stay back and have a beer with you. But one Christmas, for whatever reason, I turned up early to Mum and Dad's around 8:30 in the morning. I think at the time I was in my mid-30s, and I was sitting in the lounge room while Mum was preparing Christmas lunch, and Dad popped his head into the lounge with 2 Crown Lagers and said, "Well, it's midday somewhere, and they are looking pretty cold, and it'd be silly not to have one." For the next 90 minutes or so, we had a few cold beers and talked about work, family, a few funny jokes, and had some really great belly laughs. For a moment, I was not having a beer with my dad, but one of my mates. I will always be able to look back at that memory, thinking having a beer with my mate, my dad. Say hello to Mum. Love, Kevin Jr.
Since Mum passed away, I'd get a call most nights from Dad at 7 on the dot. He'd say he was reporting for duty, updating me on the tasks he'd completed that day, like paying his bills, updates on appointments with doctors, and of course the standard, how do I do XYZ on the laptop? Over time, these calls turned into more of a conversation between friends, a catch-up about both of our days and how he was feeling. He was able to find the humour in most situations, and damn, he'd make me laugh during many of those calls. I'm so going to miss those calls, and I'm going to miss you, Dad. Love you.
Since Mum passed, I enjoyed having lots more chats with Dad than I normally did. One day I was at Dad's place having lunch and he started telling me about his first date with Mum. He said he had a spare ticket to a show and he'd seen Mum at the church and he said he thought she looked like a good sort. So he went over to her house to ask her to the show and she said yes straight away. So he decided to ask her to a dance that night and again Mum said yes straight away. Only problem was Dad didn't have enough cash on him for the dance. No ATMs or debit credit cards back then. So Dad went to see a local identity in Footscray. Allegedly, this was Alphonse Gangatana's uncle. Dad was working in the bank at the time and he said the wad of cash the gentleman pulled out was more cash than Dad had ever seen before and he just kept peeling notes off. So Dad got the money, he took Mum to the dance. They had their first date and clearly it went well. Dad said he could not get back quick enough on Monday to repay the money. I miss you, Dad, and I hope you and Mum are now enjoying another dance together.